Mate, what the hell is Tom Platz on about?
You promise yourself you'll be the best person you can be. That is what makes you train. That is what makes muscles grow. Nobody knows the secret. That is it. I had no genetics.
Do you mind repeating yourself?
I had no genetics.
Yeah, thought you said that, because in my opinion, if anyone is at the Mr. Olympia, then they have top tier A class, one in a million genetics. The whole idea behind the Mr. Olympia is that these are the best physiques in the world. You need genetics for that. The same way that the Olympics is so praised is because these are the best athletes in the world, genetically speaking. Now, of course, hard work plays a role, and I will get onto that. Or what about sports like rugby, NFL, football, real football, by the way? Not to have this argument again because people keep calling it, soccer or whatever, real football. And other sports also, the whole point of them is that these guys are incredibly genetically gifted, and it's interesting to watch them because they're so good at what they do. And it's the same with bodybuilding. But sometimes Mr. Olympia competitors, goated bodybuilders, end up saying that they weren't as genetically gifted as everyone else. Or maybe that they weren't genetically gifted at all.
I had no fucking genetics.
Tom Platz was an example of that when he said that he had no genetics. Really? Someone who literally said he had no genetics, top 3 at the Mr. Olympia, some of, if not the best quads we've ever seen in bodybuilding history, and an overall good, complete physique when he was at his peak. And perhaps hyper-responding to literally no steroid use.
I spent, I think, $300 maybe max on each Olympia, drug-wise, that I entered. I mean, Winstrol, 20 milligrams a day, and shot a Deca, 100 milligrams a week. That was my 10-year solution to drug intervention with Mr. Olympia, as far as steroids. That was it. But it wasn't about the drugs in the old days. It was about the reps and the mentality.
Yeah, it really doesn't make that much sense to me, especially when you keep in mind that this was him in his teenage years. Other examples are guys like Dorian Yates, who says he wasn't as genetically gifted as his competitors, which, yes, you can kind of make a point of, but at the same time, mate, how can you consistently beat 6-time Mr. Olympia over guys like Flex Wheeler, Kevin Levrone, Nasser El-Sambati, Paul Dillette, Lee Priest, Sean Ray, Ronnie Coleman, all these guys?
I have better genetics than Dorian Yates. I never was 6-time Mr. Olympia. He was. Because of his work ethic. And if you see what that man did and changed his body, it was amazing. I never trained all year round like Dorian Yates because I didn't have that work ethic like he did. He bust his ass every day for 12 months. I only worked out for 5 months. I had better genetics, but he had more of a training ethic to go along that instinct that he had. I just didn't have it like that.
And by the way, this is what Dorian Yates looked like after less than a year of training. In my opinion, that just doesn't happen without elite genetics and some hard work, but again, I'll get onto that in a moment, because another person who says stuff like this was Jay Cutler. But his record may be a bit more impressive than Dorian Yates, because although he had 2 less Olympias than Dorian Yates did, he only had 4, he was still in the top 2 of the Olympia for 10 years against the best bodybuilder of all time and against one of the other best bodybuilders of all time, as well as other tough competition as well. And again, this was Jay Cutler after not much time training. Now, there is a discussion online on what actually is more important, hard work or genetics. These are things that are literally talked about for decades in bodybuilding. Tom Platz basically makes that point, saying that he has no genetics, but he had work ethic. And then he says, if you have that and genetics, you could be a superstar, okay?
I had no genetics. If you got that and genetics, you're a superstar.
And he kind of has a point, but I've also seen other guys say as well that people rely too hard on genetics. People say that, oh yeah, people just lie too much and say, oh, genetics, oh, my genetics are bad and all this stuff like that. But if you really give it enough time and you really train hard enough and long enough, then you can build a great physique. Now that's true, but will it be an Olympia level physique? Even an IFBB pro level physique? I'm not entirely sure. And then of course there is that phrase which says hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. But that will probably apply for like a very small percentage of the bodybuilders, because for bodybuilders, you need everything. And I mean everything, because there's more to genetics than most people think.
Opinions are circulated around Dorian Yates' work ethic and how he's an example of hard work beating talent, and when I say talent, I mean genetics. It's commonly referred to as talent, and how basically he was just such a hard worker in the gym that it allowed him to be a top Mr. Olympia competitor and then, win the Olympia. What was it, 6 times? Could be wrong. I think it was 6. This couldn't be further from the truth, to be honest. And I think it's funny how people really take this to heart and think it's serious, because Dorian Yates had some of the best genetics in the history of bodybuilding.
Let's just take a bodybuilder like Chris Bumstead, for instance, or even just any top tier level friggin' bodybuilder, and you put down all their genetic traits. Wide shoulders, small waist, that's a given. Good skin quality, people don't really notice that. Ability to react to steroids, ability to recover, ability to put on muscle really quickly. Genetically, how grainy can you get? Look at someone like Hadi Chopin and compare him to someone like Samson Dauda. There's a big difference. And when you keep all these things in mind, it then makes you think, oh wow, these guys have basically everything perfect, as well as the work ethic, if that makes sense. Because there are a lot of guys out there who have maybe one without the other. They may have, for instance, a good ability to put on muscle, but they may have really short muscle bellies, like for instance, a short bicep. They may have great shape, but not the ability to recover or put on muscle, or any of these things really. And that's the point I'm trying to make when it comes to the Mr. Olympia. Everything has to be perfect. There's more to bodybuilding genetics than most people think. And what I mean by that is most people think if you just build muscle or you have a great ability to build muscle, then you'll be a great bodybuilder. But that's not how it works. Now, I have 2 examples which perfectly show this. So hear me out. Let's take someone like Mike Sommerfeld, for instance. This guy is known at the moment for his unbelievable shape, and you can literally see that in his front double bicep here. His legs are huge, his clavicle is really wide, and his waist is really small. But there are other things too which play a role in here in regard to his muscle insertions, like how far his lats come down in his back, or how full his biceps are, or chest doesn't really play a role in this pose as much, but of course you can see there's not really a gap there. Now, of course, there are other genetics as well which people don't really think about in regard to stuff like how he's reacting to gear, his skin quality, if he has good or bad skin quality, so you can see the actual muscles, the muscle definition, stuff like that. The other side of that is Julian Fitzgerald. Now, look, okay, hear me out. I know he's not an Olympia level competitor, but he's just good for this example. Now, of course, he's not showing his legs here, but some of you should know what they look like. But you can see in regard to his overall shape, his lats, although not properly developed, don't come as far down as someone like Mike Sommerfeld, and his waist is blockier, so his shape is bad, although he has amazing arms. We can also see this here. Now, I know some people are going to friggin' say, look, this is an unfair comparison. You have a top-level Olympia athlete versus someone on social media, and I get that. But basically what I wanted to show was what amazing top 0.0001% bodybuilding genetics look like versus someone who has amazing genetics for building muscle, but not necessarily classic bodybuilding at least. Now, what happens when you're on the opposite ends of things? Now, let me explain. Let's take someone who has amazing genetics but no work ethic. Well, they're not going to get anywhere in bodybuilding. There was a guy I remember a few years ago, I'm sure I probably wouldn't even be able to find the clip, where basically he was like a fashion guy on TikTok, and he had unbelievable genetics, small waist and large shoulders. Well, we know that he had great shape genetics, at least anyway. And even someone like Noel Dazel made a video saying, look, I will coach you, train you, help you in any way possible, just to get into the gym and do bodybuilding because you would do amazingly. And the guy declined because he wasn't into it. And so what you get? Basically wasted potential. Whereas let's say you take guys on the other end of the spectrum, guys who have terrible, or no, I don't want to be too harsh, not very good genetics, but they have that work ethic. They have that Dorian Yates friggin' like do or die mentality, but they don't have the genetics to back it up. What happens? They will get further than the guy who has amazing genetics and no work ethic, but ultimately they're not going to go very far at least.
For the most part, unless you have elite level genetics to start with, you're not getting it. And so what do I say? Halfway there. You're the average guy and you're thinking, I want to look like Alex Eubank or perhaps Jesse James, Will Tennyson. Well, chances are you're probably not going to.
You need to be perfect. You need to have the best genetics in the world to be Mr. Olympia. But I don't want to be cynical though, because there are options out there. For guys who have maybe not the best genetics, they can still do social media, personal training, or other things in other ways, if that makes sense. There are guys over social media who, although they've taken gear and whatnot and kind of do bodybuilding training, they're still incredibly popular and successful because they've made something of themselves in a different medium. You don't have to basically put your body through immense stress, fatigue, oxygenative stress and all this stuff just for, as some people put it, a £5 trophy or something like that. And a title that doesn't really mean that much. You can do social media and you can make something of yourself in another way. But at the end of the day, though, anyone that admits Olympia has amazing genetics, and most people on social media as well, they also have great genetics. But you can still do something.